Welcome to the news and why it matters. Filling in for Sarah Gonzalez. I'm a person whose football team has won a Super Bowl in the last 20 years. Joined with Pat Gray, who's a person
whose team has won a Super Bowl in the last 20 years.
And Jason Buttrill.
And I am here. But that could all be changing in about a month or so.
Pat, what's the big story today?
I think the fact that we learned that Trump and Adolf Hitler are virtually one.
Really?
Same guy. Same guy.
Historical study.
Yeah, we found out from a high-ranking official that's the case. So.
Jason, what do you got?
So this is a crazy story, and it goes into terrorism and getting across the border, and no one wants to report on it. The Federalist is the only place reporting on this. It should be everywhere. It's insane.
All right, and I think we should maybe talk about a little bit about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's Green New Deal. I think that'll be a fun one today. Pat, start us off with Trump as Hitler.
Yes, and we find this out from a man who has brought up a lot of problems in the past. For instance, he was concerned that if 10,000 Marines were sent to Guam, that the island might tip over and capsize. And, he brings up the tough issues and makes sure that they come in and get a public hearing.
For example, I didn't know that Guam might capsize. I also didn't know that the emphasis of capsize was on size.
I didn't either.
I thought it was capsize.
But we learned all that from Hank Johnson, who has now drawn the comparison that nobody else had the nerve to between Donald Trump and Adolf Hitler.
Well, wait a minute. I've heard a lot of people make this comparison. A lot of people seem to have had the nerve on this one.
Well, he makes it as direct as I think you possibly can. Here he is talking about it.
Adolf Hitler rose to power to lead Germany in 1932 after democratic elections. He rode a wave of nationalism and anti-Semitism to power. Replace anti-Semitism with all Latinos crossing our borders are rapists, drug dealers, and murderers. Does that sound familiar? Hitler was accepting of violence towards the achievement of political objectives. Trump encouraged violence against protesters at his rallies.
Same type of violence.
Yes,
and his messaging about Charlottesville, that there were bad people on both sides, sent a powerful message of approval to the far-right racists in America. Hitler led a political movement of anti-education, anti-science racists who focused on nationalism with rhetoric about making Germany a strong country, which would result in prosperity for the German people who were hurting due to the disruption caused by the Wall Street crash of 1929 and the effects of the Great Depression. Sound familiar?
No. Is that rhetorical?
His aim was to unite the blonde-haired, blue-eyed, Germanic, Aryan people against the Jews, the Italians, the Polish, anybody else. Hitler did not start the Nazi Party, but he took over the party with charisma and leadership. The Nazis and Hitler became synonymous. Much like Hitler took over the Nazi Party, Trump has taken over the Republican Party.
What's it known as, though?
It's now known as the Trump Republican Party.
Oh, that's right. I've heard that a million times.
Trump's vow during the campaign, stop Muslims from coming into our country. That became a reality, ladies and gentlemen.
Did it? No
Muslims in the country.
Are in the country anymore?
They are gone. Not anymore.
I didn't realize that all 7 million have now vacated.
They have vacated, yes.
Wow.
They're all in Canada or Mexico.
Wow.
Was that a weird episode of Drunk History? I mean, I didn't know that Hitler was opposed to Mussolini and the Italians.
That's a great
I thought
point.
they were actually allies.
Of all the people that Hitler hated, the Italians is kind of like the lowest example of that. Like he kind of worshipped Mussolini in a way. That's a strange one. There's so much to pick apart. What was your favorite part?
I mean, just the fact that he, so far, the only blowback he's getting, I think, is from us. I haven't seen any other blowback on this. Now, if Glenn Beck even says the N-word, Nazis.
Okay, I was going to say, he should not be saying the N-word.
No, they are all over him at the ADL. Or if he makes a comparison of anybody to Hitler, or even mentions Hitler's name, the ADL is all over him. This guy makes this direct comparison and by the way, maybe we should bring up another comparison. Like Hitler is responsible for the death of 6 million Jews. Trump, 0 to my knowledge.
0 Jews? Are you sure about that?
I'm pretty sure it's 0.
There's not even a handful of Jews he's responsible for the death for?
No.
Wow.
No,
but he did
it's
oppose
under a dozen.
But he did oppose the U.S. Embassy move to Jerusalem. And
No, he actually made sure that.
Thought I had.
He has no Jewish relatives, I'll tell you that much.
Well, that's not exactly right either, since his daughter and
But he was all for the
son-in-law.
Iran nuclear deal. He was all for
true.
that.
That's true. That's a good point.
Which he got us out of.
Okay.
And I mean,
This is really bad.
It is unbelievable. It is unbelievable.
It's a straight, look, media comparisons between Trump and Hitler are pretty wide. They will go for whatever they can to kind of pair the two together. This is a really particularly bad effort because I think he thinks he has something here. I think he thinks he's
he
nailed
absolutely.
it. Yeah.
Does that sound familiar?
No. It doesn't sound familiar at all.
No, it's nothing like Trump.
Literally
No.
sounds like he set up all weekend, like on a Saturday, Sunday, and just was like connecting the dots.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh.
It's all here. The violence thing is an interesting part of this because, we were all critical of Trump for saying at rallies like, hey, go ahead, beat that guy up. He deserves a punch in the face, those types of things. But you can't get... do I have to say this? You can't compare saying a protester should get punched with the death of 6 million Jews.
No.
There's a line there, and the line's very wide. It's hard to cross.
Yes.
There's nothing there.
And the death count of Hitler goes way beyond 6 million. He's really responsible for all of World War II, which killed 100 million people.
Yeah.
And Trump's death count isn't anywhere near that.
What is it, 85 million, something like that?
I think it's under that.
Really?
Yeah, ever so
You
slightly
counting the
under.
global warming deaths?
Yes.
Really?
I am.
And you're not above 85
And I'm
million?
not above
I'm
85
surprised.
million yet. Now, it may one day reach that.
Yeah.
So far.
We had the Armageddon of tax cuts. We had, the got rid of the individual mandate.
Net neutrality. Net neutrality, that
How many
killed
people
millions.
died in the streets?
Well, the piles of dead bodies from healthcare. You're right.
Right.
You're right.
we're getting close.
I had to walk around a gigantic pile of dead people this morning.
Just to get into the front
They
door.
didn't have healthcare, I guess.
So what is the right way to take this? Because, there's a big part of me that wants to say it's Hank Johnson. He thinks
I know.
Guam is going to flip over. Why were you taking anything seriously? Or is this, because this is much more common. It's apparently okay to say that. I remember when Glenn would say something that would compare unfavorably Barack Obama to anybody, and he would get lit up by the media. No one seems to care. You could say anything about this guy.
Yeah, and again, where have you seen any blowback from Hank about Hank Johnson? I've seen none, and certainly the ADL should be leading this charge because they protect so carefully the mentions that you can make if you refer to the Holocaust or to Hitler or to the Nazis or whatever, because they're pretty sensitive about it, and rightly so. But if anybody on the right ever tries to mention them and bring them up as a warning, you're beaten to death.
I'll give you another example. Joe Wilson, who was a congressman, and maybe not a particularly maybe the Hank Johnson, not particularly well-known congressman. Joe Wilson, I don't think he was the most prominent congressman in the world, and he said "you lie" in the middle of that speech with Barack Obama. Do you remember? That was weeks of coverage. These were the most prude people in the world. How dare you say you lie to a president? Mm-hmm. All they say all the time is that he lies, but they're going past that. They're going to basically calling him a Nazi. The double standard argument is well-worn territory, but it is really true.
It is.
And I will point out on Wilson's behalf, he said what he was saying you lie to was Barack Obama saying, well, we would not give Obamacare to illegal immigrants. And fast forward to 2016, giving Obamacare to illegal immigrants was in Hillary Clinton's campaign platform. So he was totally right that was a lie from the Democrats.
It's amazing.
And it never got the credit.
And the basis for the argument of being anti-immigrant, being strong on the border, all the stuff that they've weaved into this Nazi-esque, fascist, whatever. That's the way they call him, Hitler. Mm-hmm. Literally, they were in support of the same exact policies. 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. Not only that, but they were voting for them. They were building walls themselves.
In 2006, they voted with a majority of Democrats. Yeah, voted for it.
It's amazing, the flip-flop. So they were in support of it then, but there was nothing Hitler-esque about it then. No. Now it's Hitler-esque.
Could we also make the point again that fascism and Nazism are not a product of the right?
No.
They're nowhere near the right. The right is for small government. Nazism and fascism are a huge government, oppressive government, a government so big and so powerful that they can oppress their people and become fascist. Well, the right wants the opposite of that. We want the least government possible to maintain order, and that's so you can't even go by that scale where, Nazis are not on the right. Socialists are Nazis. Nazis are socialists, National Socialist Party. And we can't forget that important aspect of this either.
And those two are not separate. You can be a fascist and you can be a socialist. I've seen the arguments with your point there, which is exactly right. Which they said, no, they were fascists, they weren't socialists. They can be the same thing.
Right.
It's two different ideologies. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Italy under Mussolini was socialist fascist.
Amazing. All right, I want to go to the border next with Jason right after this. And I want to go to the border. All right, Jason, what's going on the border?
I'm always surprised, or actually kind of shocked when I read, there's so many different alternative news, sources nowadays. You got, us, BlazeTV, you've got, there's just a ton of others. And it's interesting to me, the stories that I'll pick out in these alternative sources are I think are very, very important, but they won't get any coverage at all on CNN, wherever, even Fox a lot of times. Well, I saw the story, came out a couple days ago in the Federalist. And it was written by a guy who's with the Center for Immigration Studies. His name's Todd Bensman. Look him up on Twitter. He's got some amazing, amazing stuff and research. But he was kind of, I don't want to say triggered, but I guess inspired to go down to certain areas in Central and South America because to see if, there were the claims of that the president had said that there were terrorists, sneaking into some of these caravans. And pretty much everyone was getting mocked, or they were mocking him for saying that. So he went down there to actually do some research. So where he went was he was told that there's an area right on the border between Panama and Costa Rica. He goes, that's the main flow area. So if all these immigrants are coming over from Africa or Asia or all these other places, they land in Brazil and they kind of wander through the jungle and they link up in Panama, and they're basically ushered in by the government because the government doesn't want to establish camps and stuff. So the government gives them maps, puts them on buses, gives them care, all this stuff. This is an actual government policy, and funnels them straight up to the border with Costa Rica, and then they take them on, they go on from there. It's an actual government policy, these people. Now, we can't stop it, but we've asked these friendly countries like Panama and Costa Rica to work with us and say, okay, well, will you let us, our CIA, Homeland Security, those people, go down there and do biometric scans of them and actually do a preliminary investigation to see if they're bad guys trying to get in. Well, the amount of terrorists that are coming, that are attempting to try to get in is kind of insane. There was just, I think last month in December, there was a guy that was caught, I believe from Somalia, who was connected to Al-Shabaab, who tried to get in. We caught him right there.
I've been connected to shish kebab.
Shish kebab. But it's a little bit different ideology, but
okay.
But yeah. But it's insane the amount of people that he saw. He talked to Iranians that were trying to get in, people from Indonesia, Bangladesh, places that are hotspots for terrorism and terrorist groups. They're all coming in through these it's this crazy international or transnational immigration flow. The guy from Al-Shabaab, I guess the intelligence they got from him said that that's Al-Qaeda, basically. Al-Qaeda has a program in Africa to take them on boats, get them to Brazil, and then help them get all the way into the U.S. border. There was an attack in Canada. That's how the guy, was that a year ago? Where there was a guy that drove, I think it was a bus or a truck, into a bunch of Canadians.
Yeah.
This is how he got in, how he got through there. It's insane. No one's talking about it. It's absolutely true that terrorists are trying to infiltrate the country because of our weak border, and Central and South American countries are helping them do it.
Now, are these actual confirmed terrorists, or are they just people from terrorist nations?
These are they're confirmed terrorist groups.
Okay.
So not only they come from a hotspot or a hotbed. Actually, this guy was actually from Al-Shabaab. Insane.
Your Canadian example brings up a good point that I've been trying to push for, which is not to build a wall, but to build a bridge over the United States. So they come through, they cross the border, they just go all the way, and then they just end up in Canada.
This was a water slide yesterday. I like that idea better.
Well, I think it'd go up, yeah, water slide. Yeah, I like that. That's right. We'll just water slide them right in. That's perfect. It's an amazing thing because, we can't control what Panama does. We can't control what Costa Rica does, per se. We can try to put pressure on them. That's all we can do. But that's why the border security is important. we can't depend on Costa Rica to fight our battles for us. We have to be able to make our country secure in our own way. That's our responsibility. It's not Panama's responsibility. Yeah. And I feel like, you brought up the polling. We looked at this a little bit earlier on radio today about how far Democrats have come on these issues. The border wall in 2010, this is not 1990 or 1970, 2010 was a 50-50 issue for Democratic voters, whether they wanted a border wall or not. And now it's 89-8 against. Now, a giant chunk of that is because Donald Trump's been talking about it, right? Like they were not opposed to it when it was just is this a good decision for the border? Maybe some, maybe not. Now that Donald Trump's talking about it, they're incredibly opposed.
It's the worst thing of all time.
I mean, the Harry Reid audio you played, I don't think we have that here because it was only an audio clip, but the Harry Reid audio is him giving an impassioned speech, this one I think from the mid-90s, about how bad illegal immigration is, how they're taking jobs, how we can't reward people for coming across the border and having babies.
They're taking our benefits, they're taking our jobs, and they're pouring across the border, and he was outraged by it back then. Outraged. And now they encourage it.
If you have a principle, if you have a belief that you have to secure your country, why would you switch on that?
I don't know. I don't know how that happens.
Just the desire for voters?
That's what I think it is.
And this is kind of a different topic, but the international rules for accepting migrants and refugees, specifically refugees, I think the United States should completely pull out of that. It's absolutely ridiculous the way it works. If someone there was one in this case that I was just talking about, this guy's study. He interviewed a guy that came over from Iran. The guy from Iran was actually a Kurdish Iranian, and he left because they were trying to kill him, pretty much. He was an activist, Kurdish activist, and the Iranian government was trying to kill him. But his solution to this was to flee the country, get on one of these like crazy, migrant, routes to try and get to the United States. Well, he knows that he can land in the United States and claim refugee status because they're trying to kill him. Well, he could have went to Iraq. Kurdish-controlled Iraq and been perfectly safe. Yeah. He could have went to he could have claimed that in Panama right there or Costa Rica, perfectly safe for an Iranian Kurdish person. But no, that's the first thing they want to do. The secondary thing they want to do is just go where there's Starbucks and the Galleria Mall.
Right? Yeah.
Come to the United States and go shopping.
If you're going to claim asylum somewhere, why not go to the U.S. where your life is going to be sweet?
Because if it's really about safety, then you don't have to travel all the way to the United States illegally through all these countries to come to the United States. That shouldn't be, if that's the way you're doing it, it shouldn't be our problem. We shouldn't be criticized for that if that's the reason why. Because you could have went anywhere and claimed safety.
I will say, if we built some Starbucks in Iraq, maybe that
might help entice, and the Galleria.
There you go. Just need a couple malls. That's it. All right, we're back in just a second with more. Let me get to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's Green Deal here in just a second. First of all, I want to remind you that tomorrow morning on Pat Gray Unleashed, more on trivia, the Philadelphia football Eagles will be taking on the Chicago football Bears. Are
there any kind of Philadelphia Eagles in Philadelphia other than the football ones?
So many.
Are there
many different types?
Like soccer,
yes. Yep.
Badminton, squash,
yes, even
handball.
Some of them not even sports. Some of them just like knitting.
Really?
Yeah, the Philadelphia Knitting Eagles.
Oh wow,
it's amazing.
Wow.
So we'll do that, and Pat and I also doing radio tomorrow. So please tune in for that. We talked a little about this on radio. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez coming into Congress. She has a new plan. It's a green new world for everyone. It includes multiple trillions of dollars in cost. We've got universal health care, obviously. We've got universal jobs, right, which is kind of hidden in there with
definitely a basic income.
Basic income, which is interesting. It's just a job for not having a job.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be productive at all. You just have to sit home and collect money from the government. And that's not just like if you're on welfare, it's everybody. Bill Gates gets a check under these plans.
But that will help carbon emissions, though, right? I'm sure.
No, that's a good point. I don't see how any of that will help it. Now, if you're worried about that, they will have a giant tax on carbon emissions, which will cost multiple trillions of dollars. You want to go into this commission a little bit, Jason?
Well, you kind of hit it right there. I wrote down a quote that basically says what you just said. When we were talking about this commission this committee sounds terrifying to me. The plan for this committee is the committee will include additional measures such as basic income programs, universal health care programs, and any others the select committee may deem appropriate to promote economic security, labor market flexibility. That they deem appropriate?
I think the emperor had that exact same quote.
That's insane. Like, if you want, when you think about when, the people that pretty much, pioneered single-payer healthcare, the Brits, right after World War II. The Fabian Society straight up said that the reason they wanted to do this because this was their avenue into full-on socialism. This was the if they could get people dependent on healthcare, that's how they were going to spread out and eventually fully take control. And this is this new green push is basically the same thing. It's just repackaged into because if they can get their fingers into our business, our industry, I think does anything that you do in a daily life not revolve around in some way things in this plan? Your car, your electricity, where you go to work. Literally, that's just full-on control.
And it's not just business and industry. It's also your home because your homes would have to be retrofitted under her plans because she's going to a whole new energy source, wind and solar rather than any kind of fossil fuel. Well, we don't have, first of all, reliable technology for that yet. So it's a disaster.
It is. A new poll came out today that's went over the priorities of what should be, and this is among Democrats, of what should be talked about. And again, climate change was last on this. The reason why climate change, though, is important, because I don't think, a lot of people just don't care about it, or you might know the debate but not really care. There is I think people who are young and coming up now don't even look at it as a debatable issue. It's just like real world. They just, whatever, you said climate, whatever you want. You said climate change, whatever you want. And that's the biggest issue. The reason why it's so much more important than, let's say, universal health care is they get all of it with this. This is their way to get all of the policies at once. It's a grand grab for every policy they've ever dreamed of, and it's all under the auspices of you're hurting the earth, you're going to kill all of us. Of course you have to do these things. And that's why it's one of the scariest things. I mean, it really is. There are scientists who really believe this is a problem. There are people who really believe this is a problem. That's not what politicians are about here, though. This is their way to be able to grab as much power as possible. Yep. And it's one of those things that I don't think Republicans do a good job at all fighting against. We mentioned Trump's quote that we don't believe it because we're currently at record clean. We got to do better at talking about this because
you can't do better than record clean.
No,
you can't do better than that.
It's a record.
That's as good as it gets.
All right, we'll go into this a little bit more. Maybe some more on the border and overtime. We'll see you then.